I only wanted to attend my son's wedding in peace, dressed in the nicest dress I could find in my modest closet. I had combed my graying hair neatly and brought along a small wrapped gift for the newlyweds. No one among the 130 guests knew that I walked into the Grand Royal Oaks ballroom with more anxiety in my chest than joy in my heart. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Slap! The sound cracked across the marble floor like thunder. My glasses flew from my face and shattered into pieces at my feet, and for one breathless moment, the entire ballroom fell into silence. "That's what you get for being so selfish," Juliet screamed. Yes, Juliet, my daughter-in-law, had just slapped me on her wedding day, in front of everyone. A woman your age doesn't need that much space. Ethan and I need the apartment. It's perfect for us to start our new life. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the sharp pain that bloomed in my chest. I crouched down, trembling, fumbling for the pieces of my broken glasses. Guests turned away awkwardly, whispering behind their hands. Not one person came to help me, not even Ethan, my son, who stood rooted to the floor, his gaze lowered, not daring to meet mine. I looked up, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. Juliet adjusted her wedding gown with a smirk, as if nothing had happened. "You're not welcome anymore," she added coldly. "You should think about downsizing. You're old. You'll be safer in a smaller place." That was the final straw. For years, I'd kept a low profile. I let people underestimate me. I lived simply. I drove a beat-up car. I worked 3 days a week at the local flower shop. I wore clothes from the clearance rack, and I rarely spoke about my past, especially not to Juliet. But what no one in that ballroom knew, not Juliet, not Ethan, not the whispering guests, was that I wasn't just some helpless, aging widow. I had secrets. Secrets I'd protected. I could still hear the muffled music and laughter drifting through the thick evening air. It was surreal, how just a few minutes ago I had been inside that celebration, treated like disposable baggage by the very people I helped raise. Juliet's voice echoed in my mind. "You're not welcome here anymore." Not welcome. In my own family, in my own story. I looked at the cracked screen of my phone, heart thudding as each minute ticked closer to Carlos's arrival. My fingers trembled, but not from fear, no. This was something else. A current of electricity humming beneath my skin. For the first time in years, I felt alive. While I waited, memories surged like a storm breaking a dam. It had started 2.5 years ago. Ethan had come over, all grins and nerves, saying, "Mom, I want you to meet someone really special." And there she was, Juliet, with her glossy hair, perfectly tailored coat, and that designer handbag dangling from her wrist like a trophy. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The moment she stepped into my apartment, she looked around with a smirk, barely concealed behind polite words. "How cozy," she had murmured, examining my old sofa like it was a museum relic. Ethan didn't notice. He never did. He thought he had found love. But I had seen enough in life to recognize the hunger in Juliet's eyes. It wasn't for Ethan. It was for what she thought he came with. Back then, my modest apartment didn't seem like much. Secondhand furniture, faded curtains, tiny kitchen. But it sat in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city, prime real estate. I remember the first time Juliet casually mentioned that I should think about moving. "Have you ever considered a senior community, Aurora?" she asked one evening, feigning concern. "You'd be safer, more cared for. You're not getting any younger." I smiled then, a small, polite smile that I had mastered over decades, the kind of smile that says, "I see what you're doing, and I'm letting you believe I don't." She thought she was playing chess. I overheard Juliet on the phone with her mother in the kitchen while Ethan was in the bathroom. "Yes, Mom, it's perfect. Her apartment's huge and in the best area. If we can get her to move to a senior facility, we can move in. She's so naive, she'll probably thank us." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened the old wooden chest in my bedroom, the one with the documents nobody knew existed. Bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios. My late husband, Robert, had been a quiet financial genius. Together, we had built a hidden empire. We lived modestly by design, because visible wealth attracts predators, and predators had now come disguised as family. As I sat in the car now, watching the ballroom lights, I felt no pity for what I was about to do. They had forced my hand. They thought they were taking advantage of a fragile old woman. They were about to meet the architect of their own collapse. Headlights appeared in the distance. Carlos had arrived. Carlos's car came to a smooth stop beside mine, the headlights momentarily casting blinding beams across the cracked windshield of my old sedan. He stepped out with calm precision, carrying a slim leather briefcase under one arm and a knowing look in his eyes. He had always been that way, unshakably composed, the kind of man who could read a room without ever speaking. As he approached, I opened the door and stood to meet him, feeling the weight of decades finally beginning to lift off my shoulders. "Mrs. Hughes," he said in a low, respectful voice, "are you completely certain?" I nodded slowly. "It's time." He opened the passenger door of my car and placed the briefcase carefully on the seat. Then, under the soft yellow glow of the parking lot lights, he clicked it open. "This folder contains the documents terminating the lease guarantee you co-signed for Ethan. These," he tapped another stack, "are bank orders suspending all monthly transfers to his accounts. Credit card payments, car insurance, rental top-ups, gone." And here, I could see guests mingling with drinks in hand, unaware that their fairy tale evening was moments away from burning to the ground. The moment we stepped through the doors, everything changed. 130 heads turned. Some recognized Carlos instantly. His presence sent a ripple of tension through the crowd. After all, when Carlos Jones arrived at an event in a suit and briefcase, it wasn't to deliver birthday wishes. Juliet was in the center of the room, laughing, of course, with a glass of champagne raised in one perfectly manicured hand. Ethan stood beside her, smiling in that blank, distant way I had come to hate. Their illusion was still intact. Not for long. "What are you doing here, Aurora?" Juliet's voice rang out, sharp and shrill, the champagne flute in her hand trembling slightly. "You already left. Are you here for round 2? I didn't answer. Carlos stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, loud enough for the entire room to hear, "I apologize for the interruption. I am here on behalf of Mrs. Aurora Hughes regarding urgent financial and legal matters concerning Mr. Ethan Hughes and Mrs. Juliet Dawson." The room fell into stunned silence. Phones emerged from pockets like weeds sprouting after rain. Juliet's smile disappeared. Ethan paled. "What's going on?" he asked, stepping forward. "Mom, what is this?" Carlos pulled out the first document. "Mr. Hughes, as of this evening, the financial guarantee your mother provided for your apartment lease has been rescinded. Your landlord will receive notification tomorrow morning. You will have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the premises." Ethan blinked. "What?" Carlos didn't pause. "Additionally, the monthly transfers of $4,500 from Mrs. Hughes's accounts to yours have been terminated. This includes payments covering your credit cards, your car insurance, while you live like kings on borrowed time." Ethan just stood there, staring at me, as if the reality he'd constructed was shattering in slow motion. His jaw slackened, the color draining from his face. I watched him sink into the truth like a man realizing too late he'd stepped into quicksand. "For 3 years," he repeated, as if saying it aloud might dull the blow. "All this time. I thought I was helping you," I said, my voice even but louder now, enough to cut through the rising whispers in the crowd. "I thought you were struggling. I thought you needed support, so I quietly paid your rent. I cleared your credit cards. I transferred money so you could live comfortably while you found your footing again. And I never asked for a thank you. Juliet took a step toward me, her face contorted with disbelief and something else, panic. No, this can't be real. You're lying. This is some kind of trick. This is elder drama or manipulation or... It's called accountability. Carlos interrupted calmly, stepping between her and me. You're welcome to review all the financial records, which we've brought copies of. He pulled a neatly organized binder from his briefcase and placed it on a nearby table. Juliet looked at it like it was a loaded gun. The ballroom had gone from silent shock to breathless theater. Guests had now formed loose circles, watching from safe distances. Some were filming, some whispering, and some just standing there, frozen with the realization that this wasn't a story. They were witnessing a reckoning. Juliet, I said, turning my gaze fully on her now. You slapped me tonight in front of 130 people. You tried to humiliate me. You called me selfish, and all the while, you were living off the money I gave you, money I never told you about, money you never earned. She opened her mouth to argue again, but I cut her off. You thought I was weak because I live simply, because I work part-time, because I drive a car with chipped paint, but you had no idea who... His face twisted. What the hell is this? He gasped. You're leaving everything to charity? To organizations that protect elderly people from being exploited by their families, I clarified, locking eyes with him. That's where it's going now. The beach house, the office building, the investment accounts, all of it. Juliet let out a strangled cry and collapsed into a nearby chair, her perfectly white wedding dress crumpling beneath her. You can't do this, she shouted. You're his mother. And for 35 years, I said quietly, I acted like one. Even when it hurt me, even when you stopped deserving it. The silence was so thick you could have heard a pin drop on velvet. I turned back to the room and looked at every stunned, frozen face. You all watched her slap me, I said. None of you intervened. None of you asked if I was okay. And that's fine, because this wasn't a cry for help. This was the end of the performance. With that, I turned back to Carlos. We're done here. Carlos closed the briefcase with a quiet final snap that somehow echoed louder than the slap had. I turned toward the ballroom doors, ready to leave the ruins behind. But a voice cut through the thick silence, trembling, fragile. Wait! It was Ethan. He stepped forward, stumbling slightly, his voice hoarse. Please, Mom, you don't have to do this. I stopped but didn't turn around. You don't have to destroy everything we've built over one fight, he pleaded, his voice rising with desperation. We can fix this. Juliet didn't mean to. I spun around slowly, my eyes narrowing. Didn't mean to, I said, my tone cool, razor sharp. She didn't mean to slap me in front of everyone. She didn't mean to orchestrate a months-long plan. The boy who cried when our dog died. That boy was gone. I'm sorry, he whispered. I believe you, I replied. But you're not forgiven. The air sucked out of the room like a vacuum had opened. You're not forgiven, I repeated, louder this time, for everyone to hear. Because apologies without change are just manipulation. And I will no longer be manipulated. Not by Juliet, not by you, not by anyone. Juliet finally stood up, staggering like a marionette with cut strings. Her once pristine wedding gown was wrinkled, makeup ruined, hair fallen limp. You can't just erase us from your life, she screamed. "We're your family!" "No," I said calmly. "Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't scheme behind your back and then slap you in public." I glanced over at Carlos, who nodded in affirmation. "All financial ties have been cut. The bank knows, your landlord knows, the credit card companies know. And by this time tomorrow, the story will be public." Ethan's mouth opened in horror. "You're going to the press?" "I don't have to," I said, "because people are already talking. Videos of tonight are going viral as we speak. You slapped the wrong old woman, Juliet, and the internet loves poetic justice." I looked around the room once more, scanning the sea of shocked faces. Some were stunned into silence. Others looked genuinely remorseful. A few had the gall to clap, quietly, awkwardly, unsure of what to do. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't doing this for them. This was for me. "Carlos," I said as I turned toward the door again, "let's go." As we stepped into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd exacted revenge, not because of the drama, but because the place Juliet wanted so badly. My apartment. I need to stand in it one more time tonight, as the owner, as myself. Without another word, we got into our cars and drove. 15 minutes later, I stood in the center of my living room, barefoot now, heels in hand, on the very hardwood floors Juliet once called dated and cheap. The dim light of a nearby lamp cast golden hues across the walls. The apartment was quiet, peaceful. It smelled of lavender and old books and lemon polish. Home. For years I had allowed myself to shrink in this space, to dim my worth so others wouldn't feel insecure. I had made myself smaller to preserve the illusion of family unity. I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought silence kept the peace. But silence had become complicity, and tonight I'd broken it. I ran my fingertips across the edge of the oak bookshelf that Robert and I built together in the early days. It still stood tall, unshaken, filled with forgotten classics and photographs from another time. One frame caught my eye, a black and white photo of Ethan as a baby, asleep on Robert's chest. The edges of the picture were worn. I picked it up gently. "Where did you go, my son?" I whispered. But I already knew. The truth was, I had lost Ethan a long time ago. Not tonight. Not when he stood silently as I was slapped. I lost him when he allowed someone to poison his heart with entitlement. When he chose convenience over character, when he let money define his morality. Still, the ache in my chest pulsed like an old wound reopened. I loved him. I probably always would. But love could no longer be the reason I let myself be mistreated. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and poured a small glass of orange juice. No champagne, no fanfare, just something, and walked barefoot across the cool floor toward my bedroom. Tonight I would sleep better than I had in years, because tonight I chose truth over comfort, dignity over silence, and myself over everything else. Morning sunlight filtered through the linen curtains, casting a soft golden glow across my bedroom walls. For the first time in years, I awoke not with a heaviness in my chest, but with clarity. There was no dread hanging over me like a storm cloud. No stomach-knotting anticipation of the next snide comment, the next manipulative favor, the next cold silence from a son who used to laugh in his sleep. I sat up, stretched, and stared at the ceiling. This was peace. Not the kind wrapped in pretty words or fragile family facades, but real peace. The kind that only comes after fire has cleared the field. I made my way to the kitchen and started a fresh pot of coffee. The machine gurgled like an old friend clearing its throat. Outside, the neighborhood was already alive, dogs being walked, sprinklers clicking on, the faint hum of early traffic. Life moved forward, unaware that a storm had passed through one woman's world the night before. As I poured myself a cup, my phone buzzed again. Another message. From Ethan. Please talk to me, Mom. Juliet's threatening to sue. She says we're homeless. I didn't know what she was doing, I swear. My finger hovered over the screen. I sipped the coffee instead. So now he was scared. Not because he'd hurt me, but because the consequences had arrived. Juliet threatening to sue was laughable. Carlos had already secured every angle, every document signed, every wire transfer and asset insulated. If Juliet wanted a war, she'd be fighting a ghost. I'd spent my life hiding my strength behind quiet, unthreatening smiles. She'd mistaken that for weakness, but I hadn't gotten to this age by being stupid. I set the phone down again and opened my laptop. There was work to do. Carlos had emailed me the media inquiry. Set the record straight without adding fuel. Perfect. And Ethan? He asked. I hesitated. Block him from my accounts. If he tries to access anything again, I want it flagged. Carlos sighed. Understood. You know, you're stronger than most of my clients, Aurora. I chuckled lightly. I wasn't always. But pain teaches you things your pride never will. That afternoon, I walked down to the little flower shop where I still worked part-time. The moment I stepped in, Grace, the owner, looked up from her tiny desk at the back. Aurora, she said, eyes wide. You're all over the internet. I saw the video last night. Are you okay? I smiled. Never better. She came around the counter and hugged me, soft and warm. And for the first time, I accepted it fully. No shame, no pretense, just the kindness of someone who saw me, not as a burden or a means to an end, but as a person. I knew something was off about that girl, Grace muttered. Always felt like she was trying too hard to be polished. You don't need to pretend now, I said with a laugh. Turns out everyone was right. Except me. No, Grace corrected gently. You weren't wrong to believe in your son. You just believed in the version of him that used to exist. And just like that, I felt something shift inside. Grace was right. I hadn't been blind. I had been hopeful, and while hope can be dangerous in the hands of manipulators, it's still a beautiful thing to carry, if you learn when to let it go. That evening, as the shop closed and the streets dimmed into dusk, I took the long way home. Walked past the old bookstore, the cafe Robert and I used to frequent on Sundays, the park where Ethan took his first steps. Every place held a memory, and for the first time, those memories didn't ache. They simply existed, proof that I had lived, loved, lost. The stars blinked down like quiet witnesses. I took a seat and pulled a small wooden box from the side table beside me. It was old, worn smooth from years of handling, and inside were letters. Dozens of them, written by Robert during the years he traveled for work. He'd mailed me a letter every week, even if he was gone for just a month, never missed one. I unfolded one of them now, dated March 1984. Aurora, I know the world thinks we're odd for living so simply, but I believe simplicity is armor. It keeps the greedy at bay. It lets us see who's real. Never forget, our wealth isn't in things, it's in how we protect each other. He had always been a man ahead of his time. I smiled and placed the letter back in the box. The phone buzzed on the coffee table behind me, again. For a moment, I considered ignoring it entirely. But something in me said, face it, one last time. It was a voicemail from Ethan. I pressed play. Mom, I don't know what to say anymore. I'm not going to pretend I didn't fail you. I did. I should have stood up for you. I should have stopped Juliet long ago, but I didn't, and now I've lost you. I don't know if I even deserve to talk to you again, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Not just for last night, but for every time I let you feel like you weren't enough. You were. You always were. There was a long pause. I don't expect anything. I hope someday you'll let me try to earn your trust back. The voicemail ended. I sat still, absorbing it. It wasn't enough, not yet. But it wasn't manipulation. It wasn't wrapped in excuses or panic. It was quieter, more honest. Perhaps the collapse of everything had shaken something loose inside him. Still, I wouldn't reach back just because of a few sad words. Trust wasn't a light switch. Handcrafted, familiar. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, Ethan as a boy, sitting on Robert's shoulders, both of them laughing uncontrollably, and underneath the photo was a letter. I found this in your old boxes when I was clearing out the apartment. I thought it belonged with you. I still don't know if I'll ever deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to have this, because it's the one memory I still believe in, the one version of us I want to find again, someday. E. I held the photo for a long while, not crying, just remembering. There was no immediate forgiveness, but there was a crack in the wall, and sometimes that's where the light begins. Fall had arrived like a whisper, cooler mornings, amber leaves fluttering down on the sidewalks, and that unmistakable scent of cinnamon and change in the air. I found myself walking more often these days. No destination, no hurry, just movement. I liked the way the wind played with the sleeves of my sweater. I liked how strangers smiled more in the fall, maybe because the season reminded them, like it reminded me, that letting go could be beautiful too. One afternoon, I stopped by the community center library. I'd heard they were hosting a memoir writing workshop for seniors, just 5 or 6 people in folding chairs around a coffee-stained table, armed with notebooks and stories no one had asked to hear in decades. I didn't plan to share anything, but when the instructor asked if anyone had ever experienced a moment where their life completely changed, without warning, like a curtain suddenly pulled back, I raised my hand, and I told them about a wedding, about a slap, about a life built in silence that exploded in one night. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. When I finished, the room was quiet, not the kind of quiet born from politeness, but from recognition, because each of them had a version of that story, a betrayal, a revelation. She handed me a brownie. You know, I saw that TikTok, the wedding one. Everyone's still talking about it. Some people think you're a hero. Others say you're cold. I raised an eyebrow. And what do you think? She shrugged. I think you did what every woman dreams of doing at least once in her life, standing up for herself in the exact moment it mattered most. I sat down across from her. It's funny. I didn't feel heroic. I just felt done. Sometimes that's the same thing, she said. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. When she finally left, she hugged me tighter than usual, and I held on a little longer, too. That night, I opened the drawer by my bedside. The photo Ethan had sent me months ago was still there, still worn at the edges, still radiating warmth from another lifetime. I stared at it. then slowly reached for my pen and a blank piece of stationery. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to write. I didn't even know if I would send it, but I started anyway. Dear Ethan, tonight, I looked at a photo of you and your father, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel pain. I felt gratitude for the years we had, for the boy you were, for the part of me that still believes some things can be mended, not erased, not forgotten, but slowly stitched back together. I stopped there. Enough for now. Forgiveness wasn't a door you kicked open. It was a window you cracked, just enough to let in a little air, a little light, a little hope. And tonight, for the first time since that ballroom evening, I let the breeze in. Winter came quietly. Snow began to dust the edges of the windowsills, soft and steady, like the sky was trying to blanket the world in stillness. The holidays arrived one by one, Thanksgiving, then Christmas, then the slow crawl toward #meta. If this is the last time you ever read a letter from me, I accept that. I've started therapy. Juliet and I are no longer together. I moved out months ago. I'm living in a one-bedroom rental and working 2 part-time jobs. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I've spent the last few months thinking about the kind of man I promised Dad I would be, the kind of son I should have been. And I don't expect you to believe I've changed just because I say so. I hope someday I can show you. Until then, please take care of yourself. I'll always be grateful for the life you gave me. Love, Ethan. No asks, no bargaining, no manipulation. Just a man with the courage to own what he broke. I folded the letter gently and placed it in the same drawer where I'd kept the photo. I wasn't ready to write back. But for the first time, I wanted to. On New Year's Eve, the city lit up with fireworks. I watched from the balcony, wrapped in a knit blanket, sipping chamomile tea. The sky flashed red and gold and blue, echoing in the distance like fading thunder. Cheers rose from the streets below. Somewhere, strangers were kissing, laughing, crying. Time was passing. Life was moving. And I was still here, older, wiser, sharper, unbroken. As the last firework popped in the distance, I stood, took a breath, and whispered to no one in particular, "Happy New Year, Aurora." Not the Aurora who stayed silent, not the Aurora who bent until she broke, but the Aurora who rose, who reclaimed, who remembered who she was, and finally, let go of who she was never meant to be.